Good afternoon, everybody. This is Matthew McQueenie of the Mix Minus Podcast. It is January 14th, 2017 at 3 p.m., 2 minutes to 3, actually. There's a story I haven't really told before, which is kind of amazing when you think of the fact that I do a podcast every week, sometimes two. How is there not anything that I have yet to tell? But I keep my notes, and I was going back over them, and I saw that this story was hanging out there. I was hoping to do it before Christmas time because it's tied to that. But I'll do it now because there's no time better than the present, as they say. Last fall, so the fall of 2015, I was on Facebook, as I normally am. What is the average person on Facebook? 17 times a day, checking it. And I saw somebody share something from a Facebook page called, I think, Vintage Bergen County. And that was right up my alley. It's something that I'm very interested in. I love looking at old pictures of places that you live or have lived and just seeing the way time has changed them, or seeing places as they were 40, 50 years ago and they're really not that different. It's very neat to see it, especially when you get into the whole black and white feel. And, you know, it's obvious that many have gone before us and life was lived, and it's just a lot of fun to see. And so I thought this would be a great page to follow because you're just seeing pictures of the Garden State Mall. You're seeing pictures of different downtowns in Bergen County. Love it. Something that really caught my fancy last year, though. This was probably a month after I started following this page. This video was shared via Facebook, but it was a YouTube video hosted there. And it was called 1985 Bergenfield Christmas Eve or Christmas. And I said, wow, that's cool. How about a video about a town? First of all, I should back up a little. Bergenfield is the town that my mom grew up in for her whole childhood and her whole family, obviously. She was the oldest of, what do we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So she was the oldest of 6. She was adopted, as were 2 of her other siblings later on. But, you know, she was the head of the family. She did very well in school and growing up and had her little life there. So I thought, this would be a really neat thing to watch. 1985, that would make my mom, I don't want to tell her age here, but, you know, that would make her 30 or so. Who knows? Maybe she's in there. I had a lot of affiliation with Bergenfield growing up because of that placement of her growing up. I would go to the church there for my different communions and things like that. And we were always around the town because my grandparents lived there throughout my childhood still. So I thought this would be a cool video to see. And I love seeing things that are like the near past, right? So 1985, when I was watching this was the 30th anniversary basically of this video. Now think back 30 years. How much has changed? A lot. I mean, one of the neat things watching this video was, first of all, everybody looking for their presents on Christmas Eve. That to me is amazing. In this kind of hyper speed purchasing atmosphere we live in now, where you can get anything on Amazon and it can be at your house within 2 days, or in some cases they're now able to deliver things to you that same day if you're in the right place. But this hyper speed, this kind of hyper consumerism that we live in, we're sort of on top of our presents. I mean, that's why they call it Black Friday, right? The day after Thanksgiving, a lot of people are getting their presents. A lot of people are getting their presents on Thanksgiving after eating, and a lot of these stores will open at 6, and there's people waiting. It's amazing. So we're going back watching this video, and there are people out and about in town. And first of all, how about the fact that a downtown actually has all the stores that people are going to go through to buy stuff? I mean, we're all on Amazon. We might go to malls. And I know malls were around, but this was just amazing to me. Only 30 years ago. And the whole downtown, the whole main street there, Washington Street, it's just filled with people, brimming with atmosphere. Everybody in and out of the stores, buying everything. It was really neat. The other cool thing was there's no phones, right? So everybody's present. Everybody's living in the moment, walking up and down the street. They got their, the kids have their varsity football jackets. the older guys are walking around, the people of town, the people who grew up there and live there, the whole commerce of it all, and the whole spirituality and the world that they're all living in. It was amazing, and everybody was right there. I mean, you go there now, and I actually saw that somebody did do a video like this last year on the 30th anniversary. Very different demographics, maybe living in that city, which is fine. I'm not saying anything bad about that, but just very different. But one of the neat things in watching this, and this was a 30-minute video that had been put together, who had personal video players at this point? I mean, they're huge, right? At this point, 30 years ago. And so nobody really has them. So this idea now where we can walk around with our phones and we have insanely powerful video cameras, audio recorders, internet and email devices and all this, being hyper connected, being able to talk to anyone at any time. We don't even think of how much availability of content we have right now. So back then, there's nobody else walking around with a camera. And it's funny to see people almost taken aback as this video is proceeding. And what this is about, it was a father. It was called the DiFeo family, DIFEO. And it was a father with a Santa hat on. And his son, who I think at the time was in high school, was filming it. And he's carrying this huge camera, at least as he describes it, on his shoulder. And they're just walking around town. They're going to 6 or 7 different places that are hopping on Christmas Eve. And they're interviewing people and talking to people and kind of just going about their day and kind of documenting Christmas Eve in a Bergen County, hopping downtown. Very cool thing to watch. But I'm at work when I see this, so I have it on in the background, and I'm going through it, and it's just so much fun to watch life in 1985 and just how similar yet how different it is at the same time. And it's going through. He's interviewing a lot of people. He's going to the 7-Eleven. And of course, me, I have some morbid thoughts. So I'm seeing him talk to older people. And obviously, they're long gone. I don't know about you, but I get that feeling sometimes when I watch old movies. Or I remember when I was a kid, I used to watch Lassie and be like, oh, Lassie's like long gone. And they're all present in the video, which is interesting. But life, it happens and it goes and it does what it does. But a 30-year gap, there's a lot of life that passes in that time. And so they're going through the Exxon, the 7-Eleven, the little department stores in town, and just interviewing a bunch of people. And I'm watching it. And at about 18 and a half minutes, I get to a point, and then I see he's interviewing a young lady with an infant. And I said, oh my God, that's my Aunt Nora. My Aunt Nora, who had just had my cousin Nick. And she's sitting here in one of these stores and being interviewed. I'm going to play that right now.
Video?
Baby's first?
Yeah.
Is there any other one?
Nope.
No? He was dead. First Christmas?
His
First Christmas?
Nicholas, yeah.
He looks like he's all
Excuse me.
excited.
Are you ready for Santa?
Do you have anything to say about Christmas 85?
For me? I'll be wonderful, especially with the baby. That's the most you could ask for.
Okay, well, you have a very good Christmas.
Thank you.
And family. And next year's going to really be a good one.
Thank you.
It was like a ghost speaking to you, right? Why do I say it's a ghost? Well, first off, let me say what was said there, because I don't even know if it was clear. It was my aunt holding my cousin and pretty much saying how happy she was to be able to spend this Christmas with her baby, and that it's going to be really nice to be a part of it, and what else could she ask for? And I think anybody who sees that, imagine seeing that. So I'm watching this video, and I happen to hang around for 18 and a half minutes, and there's my aunt out of nowhere, talking through the video, pretty much talking to my cousin in many ways. And the strange thing here is my aunt passed away in October of 2011. So it just passed the 5-year anniversary, although that's usually a nice word, but the death anniversary of my Aunt Nora, who was the life of the party. She was the type of person who kept everybody together. She was the type of person who kind of would tell the stories of one group to another group, and then all of a sudden everybody's having wine together and hanging out. And she was the connection to many different communities of people. We have a family summer home, my family, up in the Thousand Islands. And for many years, this is where my aunt lived, up there, with her husband John, who she met up there through dubious circumstances, but it's all okay once you're married, you have kids, and you move on. But she had been up there. My Uncle John, who was considerably older than her, actually built a house with his own hands and friends, a beautiful house that they actually lived in, and that was something she very much appreciated. But she was the life of it all. And in 2006, she was diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. Now, this is a cancer that really, there's not a lot of ways out of it. 75% of women are not diagnosed until the late stage. And when the cancer is spread, only 25% of women survive 5 years. Now, she made it 5.5 years, but you almost couldn't imagine she was ever not going to make it, because I'm telling you, I'm not joking when I tell you she was the life of the party. She was going to concerts still with her kids. She'd go to see Dave Matthews Band. And she did 29 chemo sessions over those 5.5 years. She'd be sick for 10 days and then pop out and go to a concert, go to a garage sale. She was always moving. I think for maybe the last 18 months of her life, she was getting all her nutrition through liquid, through a port in her stomach, because she couldn't eat anymore. Her intestines were blocked up. She tried to have a surgery to remedy that, and it didn't work. So she moved right on. She kept going to concerts. She kept doing what she did. Very impressive person. And so by the time I came across this video, it was just absolutely amazing. And it was amazing that it happened around Christmas time, because I was able to share that video. And my cousin Nick was basically like, I'm smiling ear to ear right now. This is a kid who at this point is like 30 years old, and he's seeing his mom hold him and say these beautiful things to him, almost from the other side, from the grave, as they say. And this was a woman who just was unbelievably resilient. And she did things when she was sick that almost make me feel shame for when I'm really healthy that I don't do. And you start to go, am I procrastinating? Am I not living up to my full potential right now? Am I using excuses to stop myself from doing the things I really want to do? Am I being lazy? And sometimes you need that kick in the butt from things like this, from somebody living through just substandard, terrible standards and our standards, really just terrible situations. And she did that, and she made it her 5.5 years, and it was just a really impressive thing. And I always thought it was so interesting that that video came out with my cousin Nick being held by my aunt, because not only was my aunt Nora a really big advocate for people who had ovarian cancer. She would keep the blogs, the Caring Bridges. She would just be out there. She would be putting groups together, because cancer just affects so many people. It hits so many people. And I think once you're initiated into it, if that's the word, it changes your being forever. You know that you're susceptible, that you're vulnerable. We're all open to it. And once it gets you, it holds on, and its claws sink in, and to unstick that can just take terrible measures to get through. And she did it all, 29 chemo sessions, and made it a half year longer than the majority of people make it. It was quite an event. But the reason I say that, getting that video, I feel like was so important. And sometimes I wonder if there's a synchronicity in the world where I'm meant to see that video. I was meant to like that page. I was meant to see that video get shared, that video that had been sitting there for 30 years, that this DeFeo family had made a part of their routine on Christmas Eves, were to watch this movie the way that maybe my family watches Christmas Vacation, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. They watched this year after year after year, and there it was lying dormant to the public. And then it was released in 2007 on YouTube, and I think it was updated maybe last year, but there it was for me to find on that 30th anniversary, for the most part, to see that in its time, and to find that 10-second little blurb, that 10-second piece where my aunt is sitting there in a department store somewhere with my cousin Nick on her lap, telling the world through this silly video how important my cousin was to her, I think just means so much. And think about this video that's 28 minutes long, in this time where space is not a big deal in terms of the space to be able to hold a video like this. Back then, I think the kid who was holding this video camera needed like four storage devices, or I guess at that point it was VHSs. He needed to be able to hold a 28-minute video. Took so many so many units of storage to get. And here they are, they put it together. And think about all the people like me with this 10-second piece that I could see my aunt. Think of all the people watching this video, who watched this video to see a different time, who watched this video to see their loved ones going about their day on Christmas Eve, going to buy things for their family. I mean, it's really touching. But it was touching to me because obviously seeing my aunt, and she was such an important person to our family. But she had her moment where she could talk to she had 2 kids, Kendall and Nick obviously was in the video here. But she did have her time. She did a PBS documentary called The Whisper, The Silent Crisis of Ovarian Cancer. And the big key with ovarian cancer is that a lot of times women just don't know they have it. It doesn't show many of the signs that would be different than indigestion, or just feeling like you have a bad, sour stomach all the time, or just going through digestion issues. And so it's able to live and propagate and get worse and worse until the point that it is bad enough that you want to see someone. And I think it's hard to diagnose sometimes in its early stages, but when it gets there, you're in a really bad place. That 5-year deadline on your life really is there. If you want to use that word deadline, it's just a bad one to use. But she was an advocate, as I said. She was someone who spoke out, who wanted everyone to see her story. And so she was on this PBS documentary. And as Nick had ended up with that moment, she did this, and it was unbelievably touching. And one of the sad things about this documentary, which was done in 2010, so we're looking back on 5.5 years ago, it's that I was saddened kind of at this point when I was going over this stuff and wanted to do this episode. I was saddened to look through the women who were interviewed, and then to kind of warily search their name in an obituary. And the majority of them came up as having passed away and having perished in the year or 2 that followed. It was just very sad. And so you just see what a silent killer this really is. But she had this moment, and this was just something that was really, really, really touching.
I thought they had the wrong person. It was the furthest thing from my mind. And I felt like I had gotten into an elevator and the floor just fell out from underneath me. And I've been free falling ever since.
This is my mother, Nora. She has ovarian cancer.
Well, I have couple of concerns. One is on the motherly side, where I'm afraid she's not ready for me to go. And that is probably my biggest fear out of anything, is her losing her mother at such a young age. I did not have that happen to me. I had my mother till I was in my 40s, and I think it's going to be very difficult for her. I have a lot of fears as far as Kendall's concerned. I don't want to leave her.
I mean, that's just something. So there was that moment, and to be able to tie those together, there is something going on in the world. There is stuff that's meant to be found. I really believe that there's a force field we don't see that is tying us all together in a good way, not with chains, but it's tying us together in an uplifting way. There's some kind of internet of the mind. There's something tying this all together that made me like a page, that made that page then release something that had been out there for 30 years for me to then randomly watch the full 28 minutes to come across that 18.5-minute point and feel like I had seen a ghost. I mean, it's really, it's something. And it's those kind of moments that make you really believe there's more than what we just see in front of us. I mean, there really is, whether it's spiritual, whether it's a God, whether it's just some kind of force field that when a lot of people put that, whatever they say it is, the 80-90% of our brain that we don't use, when you're putting that to use somehow, or it's sitting in the background like a cloud server, tying everything together, there's something happening there. And I think sometimes that gives me a greater hope than any successes that I might have in the tangible world. And boy, did that get spooky. But you know what? I've been in an emotional state this week. I've been trying to go through my different movies and documentaries and such for my Oscar podcast that I do with Tim Castano and Jamie Mulhern. And it's this period of time where I really start to cram and jam and just move through things, and just with a pace and an alacrity that is unprecedented, that I would not do in down times, that in the summer sometimes I wish I did. I move through fast. I try to get through one piece of content a day, if not going into 2, sometimes ending up at 1.5. But what I did this last week was really move through a lot of the documentaries, and the one documentary that was unbelievably emotional was Gleason. Steve Gleason. Anybody who watches the NFL or sports knows his story. He was this, I think, about a 9-year NFL pro footballer, undersized guy who just, with his willpower and just with an unceasing motor, moved through the world and just took on all comers. He had the famous block for New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina in their first game back in the Superdome, that same Superdome where tons and tons of New Orleans residents lived actually in squalor and just not great situations as their homes were washed away, as their neighborhoods were gone. And he had this really moment of redemption for this team where he blocked a huge punt and then the team was able to come back and score a touchdown. A moment which is actually immortalized in bronze outside of the stadium as a statue. Well, this guy, after his career had ended, he was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, a disease that is just merciless and that just takes you over and day by day makes you worse and worse and takes away all motor function you can have, starting with your arms and your legs and your speech, and then everything's gone and really all you have are your eyes moving. And if you continue to want to live, there's machines that can kind of be surgically put into you, tracheotomies, things like that, where you can continue to have your body kept alive through breathing, and you're there, looking on in the world at a huge toll to your family, because they're pretty much going to have to, they're really going to have to take care of you at levels that, no one can really understand. But what this movie was sort of, there was the movie My Life with Michael Keaton. This was one that always kept in my mind. It was from when I was a kid, and it was about this this middle-aged man who, or I don't even know if he was middle-aged considered at that point. Maybe he was in his 30s, but he was married and he was going to be having a kid, and then he got a diagnosis of terminal cancer, and he used that time while his wife was pregnant to put together videos all the time to kind of to be left for his son when his son came of age. So he would go through all the lessons of life, the things that he'd learned, the things that he wanted to impart to his child that would be very important to him, to the child and to this man to go through this. It was sort of a form of catharsis. It was a form of therapy, coming to grips with this terminal outlook. And it was just always a touching movie. And in that movie, he was able to actually survive to the point where his child was born, and I think lived the first few months with the child. So that was always an amazingly touching movie. I will never forget that one. But there were many similarities in this real story of Steve Gleason. His wife was pregnant, I think, around the time that he was diagnosed with ALS, and he wanted to do a similar thing. He wanted to create videos for his son, and this documentary was actually sort of a meta version of doing this. It was a way to document not only the progression of this horrible, horrible disease, but the whole process of a father speaking to his son about the future, kind of putting himself before the future, knowing he probably would not be there for it, but that these gifts could be handed on nonetheless. And the whole aspect of the father-son, not only to him and his son, Rivers, but with him and his father, his own father, who almost became this fundamentalist Christian. And there were so many sad moments in this movie where the father would take him, Steve, to a faith healer. And then the faith healer would tell Steve, okay, you can believe it, you can run. And then Steve starts running in this little church, and he immediately 4 steps in, trips over and falls. And it's just sad as the wife knows that this is, to her, malarkey. And it's just not something that's real. And you see her pregnant, and she's a fiery woman, and she's yelling at the dad, and she's saying, this isn't right, this isn't right. And it's the whole give and take of the family dynamics that are just, they're heartbreaking. But it is so heartbreaking to watch Steve just decline and to lose his voice. And there's one extremely poignant moment where he's having an argument with his dad towards the end of him having his voice really anymore. So he actually ends up sounding like very, very drunk, very disabled. it almost like a muscular dystrophy type of deal where it's overtaken his vocal cords, but he wants to be heard, and he's yelling at his dad, and he's saying, look, I am saved. My soul is saved, because I think there's some question in the dad's mind about what that means and if he is saved or not. And he says, can't you just understand that I am saved and you're my dad? What the heck is the problem? And there's just this moment where they hug, and the dad says, I'm just so afraid of losing you. And man, when I'm watching this movie, I was watching it with Melanie, my wife, and she was overcome by it. And I think women have a much easier propensity to show emotion. I can't show emotion, but I'm crying. I'm crying inside. It is just ruining me. And what happens when... This always happens to me when the moment starts to really overcome those emotions that you can't keep in check anymore. I start laughing out loud. I can't cry, so I start laughing out loud. And it's the most bizarre juxtaposition you've ever seen, when you have someone just laughing as hard as can possibly be, because I can't take it. The emotions are killing me. And I think it's an important thing to do this. Now, I'm not only watching this for the potentials of the Oscars. This is a Amazon Studios film. Good year for them with their content. I've talked about a few things that were Amazon features that have done so well, but this was as good as you can do a documentary, to be honest. It was poignant. And then there comes a point when the son is obviously born, Rivers, and Steve he has a little bit of time where he's not in a wheelchair, but then he's ultimately in a wheelchair and he's losing more and more function. And just to see him be a father, and also to see him go through the surgeries to prolong his life because of his son, that is something I can understand. I mean, most people who would contract this awful, awful disease, they would just want to be put out of the misery. They don't want to be locked in a box that is their body, where they have to look at a screen with their eyes to type out what they're saying. And actually, a really interesting thing he did in this was to record himself speaking while he still could speak, because you can bank all these things, you can bank all these audio files. And then when you actually do lose your voice, and then you have the machine where you read with your eyes in order to, it's almost like you're reading keyboards with your eyes, and then the words come out in real time. You can bank your voice so that is the speaking mechanism when you get to that. But I was watching this, and there's a moment, I think it's his the baby's first birthday, or it's his second, whichever the case is, but it's the first, because he's got the smash cake, and he's just devouring the smash cake, the baby. And they show a side angle view of him eating with his father next to him in a wheelchair as someone else is feeding him a meal. And it was just like, wow, man, I've never been as overwhelmed by a movie. And I think at this point in time, it was just insanely important to watch it. It's important to see those things, to remember what is important in life, to just keep close to you those things that are sacrosanct to everything you believe in and everything you do in life. And sometimes you got to do that to be that huge kick in the ass of, I can walk out of this studio today and I can do things in the world. I don't need someone to be taking care of me all the time. And we can think about our own issues, and we can think about the fact that I'm not getting this done, I'm not getting this promotion, I'm not getting this raise, I'm not moving along this preordained path that I'm supposed to, I'm not living up to my potential, blah, blah, blah. But I'm doing pretty well. I'm married, I got a good house, I have a great child. I have more down the road at some point, hopefully. This isn't some kind of unveiling. I'm just saying it in general. I got a good life. I got a good family. Everything is pretty good. And pretty good is great as it relates to many others. But just watching this, and there's moments when he has been, when he's had this surgery to have the machine that will breathe for him. So at this point, you can pretty much live as long as you're willing to live, within reason. I mean, look at Stephen Hawking. He had this, and he's been around for forever. At this point, he's lived a completely full life, kept his brain alive in many ways through this body. But you can do it. And I could kind of see in this movie why someone would opt to do it. Now, again, it is at much distress to a family. It's at much cost. it's really for your own being. But I saw, when you see him be able to continue to live with his son and to see his life evolve and him grow up, and seeing the son immerse his life into the way his father lives, where they have their little routines where the son is put on his lap and then he kind of goes around on the wheelchair as if it's a fun thing around the house. And I could see there's points where Steve is sitting in the car as they're being driven. They pick up Rivers from school, and he kind of looks at Rivers and talks to him. And you're just like, hey, he doesn't have his functioning at all, but he's able to see his son grow up. And, you know, a part of me can totally understand where that's coming. But there's so much to it. There's marriage, there's parenthood, you know, seeing the precipitous decline of a once virile young man at a young age go down this path. When you see him early on speaking with his confident tone, his very stentorian voice or whatever, and then be just as strong as can be, retired at 32. And then there was a point when he was really losing function, and someone asked his age, and he said 34. And I thought to myself, oh my God, my age, I'm 34. And I couldn't imagine being put face to face with that kind of opponent. No matter how many opponents he played in the NFL, this one was just merciless. It was unforgiving. It was all those synonyms, whatever you want to use for that. But it is a movie. If you can muster up the will to watch it, and he can muster up the will to live, so you can muster up the will to watch it, but you will come out of it the better person because of what it will mean to you as a father, to you as a husband, to your wife, to your family. Man, is it unbelievably touching. And really a good job in this movie. You see from Drew Brees how much he takes up the cause and how much he does. It's just really, really phenomenal. Another documentary I saw One and Done, the Ben Simmons documentary that's on Showtime. That was a really good documentary too. It was just, I really enjoyed the behind the scenes aspect of him going from high school, from him going, first of all, them being an Australian family, and then them all coming over to America. He played at Montverde Academy in Florida, I think, for a year or two, and then to see the evolution of choosing LSU and then going to LSU and the family coming with him, and then to ultimately being drafted. To see his agent, Rich Paul, who of course is tied to the hip with LeBron. He kind of runs LeBron's agency. Of course, LeBron can't say he runs an agency when he's the best player in the NBA or any player in the NBA, but it is kind of his blind trust agency, if you will. But when you watch it, it's really well done. The basketball footage is almost cinematic in many ways. So even though you might have seen these moments in games, seeing it done with almost like a cinematography that's like a movie was just amazing. It's obvious that everyone knows they're being watched in the movie, which is interesting. But I was thinking, like, what family actually talks and fills in the blanks in real life? Like, most families, if they had a documentary, it would just be a lot of grunts and not talking and like looking at a TV and looking at each other. It wouldn't be interesting. I mean, as we find out with all reality TV, you kind of have to script it a little bit so that it's interesting. Like a podcast, when you are on and being recorded, you know to speak, and you kind of do. It was just really something to watch, though. I mean, there was a scene where the father was crying because he knew that his son was kind of leaving him and going to the agent and going to the NBA, and to have been Ben Simmons's kind of protector for all these years, and his voice, you could see that going out the window, and understanding that was going away. There was a really neat thing I didn't realize when he had left LSU, which there was no sugarcoating. The minute the season ended, he was packing up his dorm and he was gone. He was never going to see Baton Rouge again. But in that period of time, between leaving, which I guess at that point is like February, January, and then the draft, which is going to be in June, there's like a 3 or 4 month period where he just needs somewhere to go. And to see him settling down in Cleveland for those months, and who'd have known that was the case. And he's got this beautiful little condo that's overlooking the water. It looked very modern. It looked like the new Cleveland we're all hearing about, and that seems to be burgeoning there on Lake Erie. But yeah, it was really, really interesting to watch this. And I was thinking to myself, why would he go to Cleveland? Well, because his agent's there. The agent knows who the trainers are. He knows who where they can get gym time on a regular basis, where they can be protected, where they can be locked in, so Ben can train and add all this muscle weight, which he did. And Melanie was watching it with me, and she said, "Why Cleveland? That's weird. In the winter, who would go to Cleveland?" And think about it; they're from Australia. Why wouldn't they? I mean, you're kind of going to go where. You're kind of going to go where people say you're going to go, or you're going to go where the easiest, most obvious place to go is. But it was real cool watching his the whole process of the shoe deals and meeting with Adidas and then meeting with Nike up in Oregon, and then how he picked it. And it was a really well done, emotional movie. So I've been really emotional. There's been just so much when I'm trying to jam in this stuff, and I realized a lot of Oscar stuff is always going to be drama and emotional. There's just not a lot of comedies that come out of there. So you're kind of asking for, kind of a morose time. But I would highly, highly recommend it. It was very good. What else did I see here? I saw the 13th by Ava DuVernay. She was the one, of course, who did Selma, which was a really well done movie. This is an important documentary. See, it's a Netflix original, and it sort of lays out the thesis that while African American people did get out of bondage that was slavery, they were, over time, that slavery was replaced with the criminal justice system of slavery, where they're sort of put into jails, maybe at a rate that they were slaves before, and that families really are affected by this in huge ways by having the fathers who aren't around, by having families broken up, by the whole system being set up to remove, in many ways. Van Jones is in this, of course, the guy on election night who had that huge thing to say on CNN, but he was kind of saying that over the past 20, 30 years, people will say, why aren't there strong black voices out there? And he said many of them are killed, or many of them are in jail. And you can't deny when you see this. Look, I know any documentary that's put together can make a case for anything and look like it's completely the truth, but this one is pretty daunting in its case. I mean, it is something that was very, very, very very real to me when I was watching it, and I would highly recommend it if you can watch it. It was just very, very well done. If I could say very again. The other one I saw The Lobster. This is one that might not get into the Oscars, but it's kind of on the fringes of a lot of different Oscars categories. This was a movie. This was not a documentary. It was an interesting meditation on marriage and companionship. In this movie, it's sort of a future world. The setting is Ireland, although you don't know that, but the scapes are beautiful. The landscapes, the mountains, the city is nice, but it's sort of a future state of what we live in now. And in this world, you have to be married to go on kind of living in society. So a marriage certificate almost becomes like what we imagine citizenship papers are. If you break up with somebody, you are then sent to a place called the hotel, and you have 45 days from that breakup to find a companion before you are turned into an animal of your choosing. And that is the name of the movie, The Lobster, because the main character is played by Colin Farrell, and he is the guy who says, I'll be a lobster if I don't make it out. But there's this whole game to find someone to game the system in this movie. So people who are really desperate about not wanting to become an animal, they might try really hard. It's no different sort of than the way our dating scene works. But the other thing is you kind of have to have some kind of flaw that you share with the person you're trying to be with. So there's a funny scene. There's this actor, Ben Whishaw. He was great. I was wondering where he was familiar to me from, and he was in The Hour, which was a pretty good TV show, and then especially in The Danish Girl. He was the character who took a liking to the Eddie Redmayne character, who was a man who was trying to kind of transition to be a woman. When the first time he went out as a woman, this Ben Whishaw character really kind of showed up on the scene and wanted to be with the female version of Eddie Redmayne. He was very good in it, but man, is he funny in this. His dry sense of humor is great. He has a limp when he comes to this hotel. he has a limp because he goes on to tell, I believe in the story, that his mother had been brought to the hotel and she didn't make it and she became a wolf. And he would go to the zoo to see his mother. And he didn't realize which one his mother was because they all look like wolves. So he would, I think, he would cut a rabbit up so all the wolves could be fed by this little rabbit, just on the case that one of them might be his mother. First of all, this movie is completely absurdist, so you got to go in looking for the absurdity. I like absurdist stuff. I think it's kind of funny in its own way, but it's this dry, literal world. And what goes on in it again is these people have to find somebody else who has who will be able to tie up with them, and then they can go back out into the world together. But this Ben Whishaw character, he finds one woman who he likes, but she gets bloody noses all the time. So what he does is he hits his head against the wall when she's not around, when he's in his hotel room, so that he can get bloody noses, so he has something to tie together with her. Now there is this contingent of society called the loners, and they live out in the woods. And they almost feel a bit like The Leftovers and The Guilty Remnant, that TV show The Leftovers on HBO. And their whole deal is that you can be free by living with them, but that comes at the cost of no companionship. So whereas the world at large demands companionship and marriage to be a healthy citizen of the world, this group is like, no, you can live how you want, but you can't have companionship. That's the rule. So it was a very interesting movie. John C. Reilly is in it. There's this woman named Leia Seydoux, and she's great as the leader of the loners. She reminds me a little in look of Marjorie from Game of Thrones, Natalie Dormer. There's classical music as the backdrop of it, which is just a very interesting juxtaposition. Again, I said it was shot in Dublin and Ireland with beautiful scenery. And the other thing with the loners. So the people who were in the hotel, right, who have been singled out. So their companion died, they got divorced, whatever the case is, they're sent to the hotel. The way they can extend their 45 days is they're given dart guns, and then they go out into the woods, and if they shoot one of these loners, their days are extended by 2 or 3 or whatever the case is. So it's just this, again, completely absurd movie. But I would recommend it. There's a lot of stuff in it that I just found to be very funny. And it's nice to see an original work. It was this Greek writer, director, and this was his first English language movie from what I remember there. So that was good. So I do have a lot to watch still, so I'm going to try to carry that up. But it's been nice to move through a lot of different movies. Again, too emotional a little bit, but hey, this is what you sign up for. It's good to live in the world, and it's good to experience things and just see how they touch you. I mean, that's kind of how you grow as a human without going out and trying these things on your own. So, all right, everybody, I think that's good for now. We will pick it up as we move forward, as I always say. I love you guys. I'll talk to you later. Mix Minus over and out.